Okay. All right. Well, you found us again. Small biz, big ideas. I am flying solo today. My co-host and good friend Charlie Dirador is not available today, but that's okay because as I always promise you, Charlie and I only bring you the best. And we have a special treat for you today. We have someone who I consider a very close friend of mine. I consider him one of the absolute best lawyers I have ever met. And he is, most importantly, a fellow Catholic University of America law school alum, Mr. Joseph Peter Drennan. JPD, thank you very much for joining me to have this conversation this evening.
Well, Jim, thank you very much for that somewhat immodest introduction. And greetings from Fredericksburg, Virginia.
And you know what? It is so one of the things I always think about with you is you embody kind of the Commonwealth, the most positive aspects of the Commonwealth. And as I know that you are a history buff, and as folks see the office decor behind you, I just want to assure folks that listen, it, this man can quote history backwards and forwards about the Commonwealth and Fredericksburg, 10 Ways to Sunday. It is very impressive, and I think you all are going to enjoy this conversation with him. So, to kind of get our listeners going, tell us a little bit about yourself, and your background, where you're from originally, all the good stuff about you.
Well, I'll have to start off with the proviso that the the Irish are notorious for being uncomfortable about talking about themselves. So I'll try to overcome that handicap here uh, by saying this. I mean, we're here in Virginia, but I was not born in Virginia. I was born in Albany, New York. Was born in Albany, New York, and I spent a good deal of my childhood in Utica, New York. And uh, among the illustrious people of today, there's one person that falls into that category that I can think of, and that's Paul Krugman, the economist. He was born in Albany and spent his early childhood in Utica, and then he moved on to New York City. Well, I moved on to other places in upstate New York. I lived in Rochester for a year. I lived in Pennsylvania, central Pennsylvania, for a couple of years because my father was transferred. And then when I was in the eighth grade, my dad was transferred to Hartford, Connecticut. So I wound up going to high school in Connecticut. But when the time came for me to go to college, I came here to Virginia, to the University of Richmond undergrad. And there's kind of an interesting story behind that in a way. I was all set to go to either Bowdoin or Colby College up in Maine. And I was homesick with the flu one day in my senior year of high school, and the phone rang. And I heard this Southern accent on the phone. And and the gentleman says, I'm the dean of admissions at the University of Richmond, and I heard that you're a good student at your high school in Enfield, Connecticut, and I'd like to talk to you about going to the University of Richmond. And I was so flattered that the dean of admissions was calling me at my home, and I just happened to be there that day because I was sick. I was so excited. My parents were happy about it too, and they drove me to meet Thomas Pollard, the dean of admissions at the University of Richmond at the time, at a Ramada Inn at the Bradley International Airport, where they sat in the lobby, and Dean Pollard sold me on the University of Richmond in about 30 minutes, and that was where I wanted to go. And in a way, it made my father particularly happy because my father was born in Norfolk. So,
Wow.
so that's how I wound up at Richmond. And then probably another aspect of the story that bears mention is that when I was between my junior and senior years of high school, I was selected by my school to be a congressional intern for Senator Lowell Weicker of Connecticut. And that was the summer of 1973, which was the summer of the Senate Watergate hearings. And the Enfield Republican Women's Club, by the way, that's when there was a Republican Party, um, sponsored me to go to Washington to be an intern with Senator Weicker and put me up in a hotel, and my expenses were all taken care of. And every afternoon when I got the chance, I sat in on the hearings, and it was a really eye-opening experience. And that got me interested in politics and the law. And when I completed my undergraduate studies at Richmond, I decided to go to law school at Catholic University because I had relatives who had gone there. A cousin of mine was in the class of 72, Catholic University Law School. And I went there, and being in the nation's capital and attending law school during those heady times, a lot was going on between 1978 and 1981. There was the Iran hostage crisis, and I had the good fortune of getting uh, a job as I was completing my first year of law school, a law clerking position at the U.S. Department of Labor. And I spent a year there. And then I was a clerk at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission for a year. And then I came back to the Labor Department. And as I entered my third year of law school, I thought I was all set. I was going to work in the solicitor's office at the Labor Department and become a government lawyer. And my parents were very happy with that, and I was happy with that prospect. And because I felt that I was a shoe-in to be hired by the Labor Department, I did not prepare a resume to go to the interviews of the big firms, or I didn't apply for clerkships or anything of that sort because I was all set, or so I thought. And then when President Reagan was inaugurated on his first day in office, his first action was to sit down and hold a press conference and sign an executive order imposing a hiring freeze on the federal government. And I thought, oh boy, I guess I miscalculated. There goes my career prospects with the federal government. And and then I knuckled down, sat for the DC bar, passed the DC bar. The pass rate was 52% that year, by the way. And and I applied for dozens and dozens and dozens of positions in law firms and with oil companies and gas companies because of the fact that I was at the FERC, which regulates gas pipelines and gas producers. And I had some familiarity with a long forgotten statute known as the Natural Gas Policy Act of 1976. Isn't that the most boring thing that you've heard on your podcast, Jim? Anyway, nothing came of that, and I don't want to sound morbid here, but I was sitting in my efficiency apartment in Roslyn, right across the river from Georgetown, and when I would get the rejection letters back, I would I would put them between the salt shaker and the pepper shaker on my small table where I took my meals in my efficiency apartment. And I'd look down at the salt shaker and the pepper shaker. And what would really get me depressed was to see how they were moving further and further apart with each passing day. And I would have these long calls with my parents as to what I was going to do with my life, with my career. And when I passed the bar exam, my father, who was not a lawyer, but a very wise man, said, Joseph, you keep complaining that you don't have a job. You don't need a job. You have a profession. You're a lawyer. Go down to the courthouse, put your name on the list to take appointed cases. And that's what I did. And the first case that I was involved with as a second chair uh, for a lawyer that I had been writing some motions for as I was awaiting my bar results was a first degree murder case. And then after that, I started taking cases on my own, um, starting with misdemeanor cases, petty larceny, uh, other types of minor infractions. And then I started trying cases. And my very first trial on my own was an acquittal. And and I said to myself, this is kind of fun. It's interesting. And in those days, I did not even have an office. I just used to leave my apartment, walk to the subway, go to the courthouse. There was a room next to the lawyer's lounge where I would meet with my clients. And often my initial meetings with the clients were not in an office setting at all. They were in the central cell block of the courthouse, where I would just basically get information from the client concerning his residency and his ties to the community and to vet the information that was on the pretrial services sheet to try and get that client admitted to bail. And it got to the point where about every 3 or 4 weeks I was in trial, and I tried a lot of cases. And then came a case involving an Israeli immigrant by the name of Roger Heffez. And Mr. Heffez is now deceased, but Mr. Heffez was a very important client in my life because he was arrested by a couple of Metro Transit officers, an arrest that was instigated by a station manager. And the reason that he was arrested really was because he had seen this station manager abusing a couple of ladies for rushing into the station at Van Ness, which was the end of the Red Line, by the way, in the early 1980s, and and the station manager turned to Mr. Heffez and said, go home, you foreigner, go back to where you came from. And then right before the first train left out of that station that morning, the station manager said to Mr. Heffez, I will get you. The next morning, he was there as he was every morning to go to work as a bellhop in a hotel on Capitol Hill. And and there were two Metro Transit police officers, and the station manager just pointed out Mr. Hefez and said, "Arrest that man," and he was arrested. And I was just so taken when I saw him, just terrified in the cell block, uh, and I said to myself, there has to be something there, something that maybe I could get some relief for him if I get the case dismissed. I ultimately got the case dismissed, and then I started doing some research about suing Metro and suing the police. And and this was with no mentor, nothing. No one was giving me any encouragement to do this. But I just was so taken with Mr. Hefez's case that I thought he has to have some way of getting redress for the wrong that he had endured. And the case wasn't dismissed for several months, and he was pretty emotionally traumatized by it. But what did I encounter when I started doing my research? One, there's something called sovereign immunity. Sovereign immunity? What? I thought only the US government has sovereign immunity. Oh no, state governments have sovereign immunity. Metro had sovereign immunity because Metro was a creature of the federal government and Maryland and Virginia. But I said, there's got to be a way. And then I thought, well, what is the nature of the immunity? And I looked up in the statute, and the statute said that uh, Metro is immune um, uh, from any suits involving governmental functions, but what could be sued for suits emanating from Metro's proprietary functions. And the statute didn't elaborate about either. Well, you might say, well, the police work is a government function, but Metro's primary function was to transport people on the subway. And I found cases hither and yon that stood for the proposition that subways are proprietary functions. And I went on that basis and opposed the motion to dismiss and prevailed on that motion. But then there was another hurdle, and the other hurdle was something that we hear a lot about today: qualified immunity of police officers, because I was suing the police officers as well as the station manager, as well as their employer, Metro. And and I was able successfully to prevail on that as well. And to my knowledge, that was the first time that Metro was ever successfully sued for a uh, a false arrest on the Metro.
Wow. So, you go off into practice out of necessity by yourself. So, since that
Because I
time,
didn't have a job.
um, so since that time, you've only maintained your own solo practice, correct?
That's correct. That's absolutely correct. And I'll tell you, in the early days, it was, I'll tell you one handicap that any young lawyer has is that people, um, when I say people, even law school classmates in many instances think, who does he think he is practicing law on his own in Washington, D.C.? You know, there's thousands of lawyers in Washington, D.C. There are tens of thousands of lawyers who are members of the D.C. bar. And who's going to hire a young lawyer? A young lawyer with no office. I didn't even have a car in the beginning. But because of having been appointed to represent that particular client, and that particular client, by the way, did not qualify for court-appointed counsel, so he agreed to pay me, to hire me. And then when his criminal case was resolved successfully, uh, I suggested to him that he might have a remedy in suing Metro and the police officers and the station manager civilly. And he believed in me and trusted me, and I tried that case and won that case. And it was written up in the Washington Post. And by the way, that was the only advertising that I ever had, really, was write-ups in the newspaper for my cases. I always resisted uh, uh, solicitations from companies that were trying to get lawyers to do TV advertising, radio advertising, print advertising. And I thought to myself, I don't have the money to do any of that. So again, necessity is the mother of invention, you know.
Absolutely. So in the course of your practice, um, what I guess the big question I have is as a small business guy, because you're the ultimate small businessman, right? You're a solo shop, and over time, obviously your practice developed. But like, what were two or three of the biggest lessons you learned being a guy out there uh, on your own, plying your ware?
Biggest lessons. Um, well, I saw um, colleagues make mistakes. I saw colleagues make mistakes in forming law firms and partnerships where um, one lawyer was the go-getter and the workhorse, and the other basically was not carrying um, his own weight, either in garnering business or in some instances in paying expenses for law offices and the like. And so, seeing those kinds of situations, I thought to myself that the best way to approach my practice of law was to just work right out of my apartment for the first uh, uh, couple of years, and then in early 1983, my late father gave me a small loan to open up my own office, and I thought that it was important, especially to try and uh, and avoid the disparagement that would sometimes be, or dismissiveness that would sometimes be heaped upon young lawyers who were deigning to start up their own law practice, by saying to myself, I'm going to be in downtown DC. I wasn't on K Street, but I was, sorry about that. I've silenced my phone, but for some reason it still rings through here. I wasn't on K Street, but I was one block over. I was in a brand new office building at 14th and K, and there was an ideal, in my judgment, set up uh, for a young lawyer to start a law practice. There, you get off the elevator on the 11th floor of this building, and there was a beautiful lobby with a chandelier and a receptionist, and there were maybe a dozen or 2 dozen lawyers on that floor, and they shared the same receptionist. They had a small law library. There was a kitchen. There was a conference room, and when I opened that office, I think that went a long way to help me to garner new business. Uh, I would have initially have my court appointed clients come there to meet me when I was still I would because I was still taking court. I only took court appointed cases for about 3 years, but I remember one client came to my office and he looked around and he was very impressed and he said, Mr. Drennan, he says, I thought you were a street lawyer. The term that they use on the street for lawyers taking court-appointed cases. He said, "Are you a money lawyer?" And that was the term that they used to describe lawyers that appeared to be um, uh, uh, prospering and making money. Sometimes appearances can be deceptive, by the way,
Right.
especially in the early years. But to harken back to that first trial that I had against Metro, um, that was written up in the Washington Post, there was an alumni event uh, at our alma mater, uh, Columbus School of Law, and that was the talk of the class. They one classmate of mine who came from a wealthy family, and he was with a big law firm up in Hartford, Connecticut. And he said, "Oh, I heard about your trial." He said, "But I also understand that Metro is appealing. Who are you going to retain to handle the appeal?" And I just was taken aback by that. To tell you the truth, I thought that of that as something of an insult. I said, "Who's going to handle the appeal? I'm going to handle the appeal." And then he said, "You've never handled an appeal. Aren't you concerned about malpractice?" And I said, "Listen, guy, I survived a motion to dismiss. There was a reported decision. This is cutting edge litigation. The file is about 6 inches thick. No one knows that record better than I do. So I'll make up for what I lack in experience with my knowledge of the record and my enthusiasm for the case." And and so it went. That I spent weeks working on my brief, and I'll never forget this. The DC Circuit announced oral argument for the case. And at that point, I had moved my office to the Federal Bar Building over at 1800 block of H Street, just a couple of blocks from the White House. And and as part of my ritual, every morning I would go down to the library that was in the basement of that building. And it was kind of a dank place. It was dark. It was kind of damp. But there were lots of law books there, and they had the Washington Daily Law Reporter available every morning, and I couldn't afford to buy a subscription to the Daily Washington Law Reporter, but I used to read it every morning. And so a week before oral argument, I just perchance saw on page one that the Supreme Court had just decided a case called Malley versus Briggs that dealt with qualified immunity. And I thought, oh my goodness, I read the decision. I said, I think this helps us or helps my client's case. So I prepared a supplemental brief, and I couldn't even type in those days. So I had to borrow an IBM Selectric typewriter from a lawyer down the hall and type the brief, take it to Kinko's to get it bound, and went in a taxi cab down to the courthouse to file it. And during oral argument, I'll never forget this. Um, there were questions that concerned qualified immunity. And one of the panelists who was really engaged on that was a jurist by the name of Antonin Scalia. And as it happened, that was just about the last, this would have been the spring of 1985, where I was still, spring of 85 is when I tried the case. Spring of 86, I hadn't even reached my 30th birthday. I was 29 years old. And and goodness, that was helpful to persuade the panel to affirm the district court. And the other panelists were also excellent judges. One of them was Senator James Buckley, a former U.S. senator who became a judge and was a pretty good judge. And the third was one that became known as the notorious RBG, Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Wow.
And suffice it to say, they did the right thing and they affirmed.
Good.
And I was off and running.
So, coming forward now, what is your practice look like today?
My practice today is focused primarily on representing victims of state-sponsored terrorism. And those would be uh, over 200 clients who were associated with as family members or victims or estates of victims. The Beirut barracks bombing in Lebanon in litigation against Iran, um, and the uh, the 9/11 cases in New York, where I also have something over 100 clients there. So that's the mainstay of my practice today. About 5% or so of what I do today is in the immigration space, and where uh, we're we're dealing with an unprecedented assault on the rule of law, and I tip my hat to my colleagues who devote their entire practice to that area. And I've always been very close to the immigration bar, and so I'm involved in immigration law as well. Um, I have in the past handled uh, cases involving foreign um, officials who have been sued for war crimes or crimes against humanity under the Torture Victim Protection Act or the Alien Tort Statute, and I've had some interesting litigation experiences in that sphere. And probably the case that garnered the most attention from my children's generation is litigation on behalf of a Palestinian shopkeeper who was falsely portrayed by Sacha Baron Cohen in the Bruno movie as the leader of the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade. And that case got, incidentally, more publicity worldwide than any one of my individual cases. So it's been an interesting journey.
So, uh, it's been a long, fruitful journey for you. If you were talking to someone who, was, be it young or old, and they decide, hey, I want to go out and do my own thing. I want to start my own business. I want to start that taco truck, or I want to start an HVAC business. What what advice would you give them?
I'll tell you the best way I think to answer that question is to relate an experience that I had with our law school alma mater, where they had career day when uh, this was this was 10, 15, no, 15 or 20 years ago, where representatives from law firms, from government agencies, from trade associations that would be interested in hiring young law school grads would come and make a pitch to law students to talk about working for a trade association or working for a big law firm. And the law school said, "Well, Joseph, you're a solo practitioner. We've never had someone come as a solo practitioner to talk to uh, the students about going into solo practice as you did. So why don't you do this?" And I was flattered by that invitation, and I agreed. And the way that the this workshop or career day was organized, the students would be given a sheet with all of the different presenters and what classroom to go to hear their presentation. And I was told to go to a classroom, and I sat there, and no one came. No one came. And I thought to myself, well, what am I doing here then? No one came. And then at the end of the day, they had a reception in that beautiful atrium there at the law school. And all these students were coming up to me and asking me about what it was like to start a solo law practice. And I said, well, why didn't you come to my presentation? My non-presentation, if you like, because no one came. I didn't have a presentation. And I got the same response from virtually all of them. And it was something like this. Look, Mr. Drennan, I I really would love to do something like that, but I just don't think I could do it because I have $150,000 or more in student debt. I have a spouse who has a lot of student debt. Uh, I'm married. I have young children. I need to get income right away, and I need to make a living. And I would tell them, look, you should have come. I could have given you some advice on that. You could go and take court appointed cases, and at that point they had raised the compensation for representation of indigents under the Criminal Justice Act to a level where a young lawyer could, if he controlled his overhead, could actually make a living, even with a family. But they all shied away from that because they just didn't think it was possible. But it is possible.
Yeah. Um, over the course of your practice, I'm sure you've represented small businesses at times.
I
Kind of
have.
what what are some of the traps you think some small businesses have kind of fallen into?
Oh, let's see. I'm trying to think of some poignant examples to give or an example. Um, I would say that in the main, the the biggest trap that businesses can fall, especially startup businesses, can fall into, whether it's whether it's a franchise or setting up a store, uh, it's keeping overhead under control. It's really important to keep overhead under control and to only uh, incur those expenses that one absolutely needs to incur to get the business going. And secondly, and this is where a challenge comes in to play uh, quite often, is uh, to try to develop some uh, credit facility and to use it wisely.
So over the course of the years, because I know one of the main challenges, obviously, small businesses tend to have is capital and having access to capital.
That's right.
How did you maneuver around that?
Oh boy. I'll tell you, it was quite harrowing at many times. Um, Keeping the office phone turned on was a challenge. And there were a handful of occasions when I just didn't have the money to pay my phone bill. And my phone service was interrupted. And those were the most harrowing times of my life, was scrambling to get the funds to get the phone turned on. Because if you don't have a phone, you don't have a business. And it was that basic. And telephone rates and phone service charges were much higher than they are today, uh, because you had long distance calls, and in the type of practice that I was building, um, my 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 office phone bill would be in the hundreds of dollars every month, sometimes even higher than that. So that was a huge challenge, like just to keep going. Um, and and uh, and ultimately in 1992, I decided to move my practice to Virginia because I was developing more of my cases in Virginia, and clients were resistant to driving to downtown DC and getting their car ticketed or towed. And and I landed a nice office sharing arrangement right in the heart of Old Town for a reasonable rent, and the same type of situation that I described earlier with regard to my first office at 14th and L in downtown DC, at a place called Crilly Warehouse, an antebellum building that had been uh, converted or repurposed as a kind of a multi-purpose building with restaurants and offices up on the third floor. That was in 1992. Do you know where my main office still is? It's still there.
And that's in Old Town Alexandria,
It's
correct?
in Old Town Alexandria. Yes. My fairly modest office, but in a nice location and with nice colleagues and very congenial atmosphere there. And and so I've even though I've had some considerable success along the way, I've always adhered to the maxim that it's important to keep your overhead under control, even now. Big firms make that mistake too.
Right. No, I think big businesses, I think it's even more dangerous when you become a large business that you're making money, sometimes money hand over fist, and you lose objectivity, first of all, and you lose sight of the things you're doing.
Yeah,
And
I don't want to mention individual law firms that have fallen by the wayside over the decades, but there have been a few of them in DC who were big firms. And I noticed something that always just 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 flabbergasted me to see how law firms were trying to outdo each other by buying expensive artwork and hanging it on the walls in their offices. Millions of dollars. And some of those firms, or a few of them, wound up being the subject of articles in the Wall Street Journal about why the firm failed. And one of the factors typically mentioned was overhead got out of control.
yep, that will do it. Um, as we get ready to wrap up, tell me over the years, kind of as a businessman, because even though practicing law is a career unto itself, I mean, functionally, you've had to be, your own businessman through all of this.
That's right.
And some of the biggest lessons you've learned, I think, from that. I mean, I probably asked the question slightly different earlier, but like now here, even though you're a spry young man, um, kind of on, on the back end of your career, um,
Back what?
the
Take that
back
back.
at the front end of your career now, um, you know, some again, what have you learned? What's the biggest things you've learned from all of this, right? And what would you want to impart on someone just kind of starting out right now?
Uh, I'll tell you, the practice of law is a wonderful profession. I mean, it's much derided. Who hasn't heard all sorts of lawyer jokes, for instance? But it is the type of career that can can have incredible uh, uh, opportunities, opportunities that you don't even know are going to be there when you start off. Um, when I get asked questions like this, I sometimes relate an experience that I had when I was a law student, uh, and uh, and I uh, didn't just read law books when I was in law school or case books. Uh, I had subscriptions to this was before the internet, by the way. So I had subscriptions to The Economist, to The Atlantic, to all kinds of opinion journals, and the Wall Street Journal, and I remember a classmate came by to pick me up to go out to a party one day, and he comes into my apartment and he sees all of these books about current events and history and so forth, and he says, "What are you reading all of this stuff for? What's that going to get you in life?" And I said to him, insert name, don't want to say the person's name. I said, if you're going to ask a question like that, I don't think you'd understand the answer. And you might say that that sounds really condescending to say things like that, but I had a keen interest in um, world affairs and the Middle East uh, and and I'll tell you, all of that interest and knowledge that I was developing back then uh, has stood me in good stead because I've had opportunities that other lawyers might not have had. I represented a lawyer who was involved in litigation over the closure of the Rwandan embassy at the time of the 1994 genocide, uh, the war crimes cases involving Somalia. Uh, I represented a lady who was who was the anchor woman for the English newscast for Iraqi state television during at the time of the Saddam Hussein's regime, or shortly thereafter, where she was defamed by an Arabic language newspaper suing her, accusing her of embezzling money from a war orphans charity, and that case stood up on appeal to the Fourth Circuit. I mean, how would I get these cases if I hadn't been spending all of that time when I was a law student reading about the Middle East, reading about world politics, and so forth? So, um, does that answer your question?
It does. And I think one of the things as I, talk to not just young people per se, but people who are, trying to start out in a business or a career. One of the things I always try to kind of impart on them is, number one, what it looks like on day one is not necessarily what it's going to look like on day 10. And don't assume that because it looks, your expectation is it's going to look, I'm making this up, red, blue, and green.
Uh-huh.
And it ends up being red, yellow, and purple, but you're doing what you want to do and it's going generally in the direction you want it to go. Don't think that that's a failure or anything like that. Moral of the story is you have to be flexible and you have to show flexibility in all of this because it's no matter whether you're starting a small business or whether you're starting a career or whether you, even if you go work in a big business or whatever it is, you go work in the government, that a person has to be prepared to be flexible in this life.
No,
And
that is
that's
very
hard.
true. By the way, can I amend my answer here? There's another development that has come along at our beloved alma mater in recent years. When you and I were in law school, they didn't really tell us how to set up a law practice. They told us about the law, but they didn't tell us how to run a business. They didn't tell us uh, about all of the practical uh, issues relating to running a law practice or any other kind of business. Uh, we sort of had to learn by the school of hard knocks, so to speak. But recently, i.e., within the last year, uh, the Columbus School of Law and some other law schools across the country have established uh, uh, law and entrepreneurship programs, and and Catholic University has done that as well. And I look upon those initiatives as being uh, very, very helpful uh, to young law students that are coming into the profession now, so that they won't have to deal with some of the mistakes, if you like, that I did. And I was so impressed by that program at the Columbus School of Law that I've made a not insubstantial donation to that program.
Okay. No, I think um, those types of programs are very important because at some point, I think we're going to dedicate some time in this podcast to talking about providing technical assistance to small businesses. And programs like that are necessary to help. One, it's a fertile ground for students to learn and understand business, but it also, the flip side of that is those businesses need, low or no cost access to technical assistance. And those types of programs are great starting points for that because for some basic things, why pay exorbitant amounts of money to learn how to incorporate a business or, potentially to get a copyright or something like that when, there's a law student or a business student who can help you get achieve the same thing. And it's in a guided environment. So no, I think that's very important. So as we wrap up, I know you have your own podcast. Where can folks find you for your podcast?
Well, I'm kind of a newbie at podcasting, but I have indeed established my own podcast, and that podcast may be found either at my LinkedIn account or my YouTube account for Joseph Peter Drennan, attorney at law, on YouTube, um, in my LinkedIn account, and and I believe that the podcast is also available on TikTok.
Okay, that is great.
I
Well,
do have a website, www.josephpeterdrennan.com. However, I have yet to integrate uh, the podcast's links into that website, but I look forward to doing that in the near future.
okay. Well, as we go on the outside here, I will say to all of those who have been listening to Small Biz Big Ideas over the last few weeks, we've been seeing your comments. We thank you for following us. If you haven't already, please subscribe on Apple Podcast, on YouTube, on TikTok, on LinkedIn. Subscribe anywhere you can find us. Charlie and I enjoy doing this, and I expect that my good friend Charlie will be back to join us next week. Um, as I told you we were going to have a treat for you, and Joseph Peter Drennan is definitely that. So, as I love to say to everyone, as we always end these things, be good, be better, and be best. Thank you very much for joining us, and JPD, thank you for joining us this
And
evening.
thank you for everything, Jim.
All right, thank you.